Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to episode 80 of Inspiration Contagion. This week's guest is Darin Kidd. Darin is a best-selling author, global keynote speaker, executive trainer, and business growth strategist. As a successful entrepreneur of 32 years, he has built businesses that have produced 9 figures in revenue. He is a husband and father of 5 who is focused on making a global impact. Well, I don't know about all of you listeners, but I'm pretty excited. 9-figure business is definitely speaking to me. So welcome, Darin Kidd.
All right. Thank you, Holly. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Let's dive right in. I want to hear, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what's your secret sauce?
Well, and first of all, thank you so much. You're doing amazing things, and it's just been awesome getting to know you and all of your um, depth of knowledge, and you're it's just been a blessing. So thank you for that. Um, Holly, when people introduce me, they always have all the things that they say, which I mean is important because it's important to listen to people that have what we want. Because so many times we buy people's opinion, and when you buy people's opinion, you buy their lifestyle. And for those of you that are just listening, you can't see the video. I'm very hair challenged, so that's an understatement. So you wouldn't listen to me on hair care advice. So it's important to know that when you're listening to somebody, they've been where you want to go. And so people have those great things, and they are great. But I always like to share the story behind the story, which is 25 years ago, that was not the case. My wife and I were actually bankrupt. My car was repossessed one street over from where my office is right now. I'm a college dropout. My wife's a college dropout. I was depressed. Things weren't government assistance and car repossessed, all of those things. I felt like I had no hope. People can relate to that because we've all been through the storms, and storms don't come to stay, they come to pass. And so with that was when it finally hurt bad enough when I was taking money on my daughter's piggy bank that we said, hey, someday we'll use that money for Disney World. And she walks in and sees me on the floor going through that change, just trying to find enough to get some food, bread, milk, cereal, peanut butter, just to last a couple of days, just to eat. And when she ran out of the room that day, Holly, that's when I go, I've had it. You can't change your life overnight, but you can definitely change the direction of your life overnight. And that's when I walked in the other room and took a 3x5 index card and wrote, I will until, which is the name of my book. And that was the mindset, because success, 80% of success is psychology, it's mindset. That was the mindset that helped me pivot, that led to me completely changing my life and traveling and speaking all over the world. And so I love sharing my story, not to impress people, but to express to people your past doesn't equal your future. And if you have the right mindset and you're coachable and you're willing to work and you've got that burning desire, you can create the life of your dreams.
Yeah, no, that's so important because the reality is all of the folks that I interview, we all have our challenges. We all have those moments that are embarrassing and are not exactly where you wanted to be, but that's part of the human experience. And honestly, the most inspirational leaders that I've met through the podcast and through networking and just through life in general are the ones who have had those kind of rock bottom moments, but in that moment, that was the eye opener for them where things changed and they clicked and they just said enough of this and chose a different direction. And I think the tenacity and grit of the human condition, the human experience that I see time and time again with leaders who have been at their rock bottom, their big challenge, their big thing, it's just incredible to see how people can come up from that. So thanks for sharing that story. I really, really appreciate it. Beyond that, I wanted to ask you, what does inspiration mean to you? So you have this "I will until" concept, but can you tell our listeners a little bit more about that and what inspiration means to you?
Well, I mean, one thing I want to mention that you were just talking about, Holly, is the people that you interview. The reason that they're an inspiration to other people is because they took the challenging times and they didn't let them make them bitter. They let them make them better. And one thing that I didn't know, or it didn't serve me well. I used to look at fear or failure as a negative thing. I used to look at obstacles as something negative. And what I found was that failure and obstacles are really your best friend. Failure and success are not separate, they're together. And so it's not the easy times that make you grow. Obstacles lead to elevation if we ask the right questions and we do the right things. And so looking back, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me because it forced me out of my comfort zone. And so if you're looking to get something you've never gotten before, you got to do something that you've never done. You got to think differently. So the same thinking and behaviors that got us to where we are, not the same thoughts and behaviors that get us to the next level. It's going to take a new way of thinking. It's going to take different behaviors. And so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that because for a while, every time I go through a challenge, I would go, oh man, not another one. And don't get me wrong, I'm human. There's sometimes now I'm like, oh my goodness, another one. But there's always a blessing within that challenge. There's always a positive with the negative. But it is important that we do the right things when we're going through those challenging times. And so what inspires me, Holly, is hearing other people's stories of what they went through and what they did to change their life. Because that's relatable. When you see these people's stories or hear their stories or see their life that's posted all over social media, a lot of times it's not Facebook, it's fake book, because they're showing you all this stuff and you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do that. But what happens when you're real, when you're authentic, when you share the struggles, the ups and the downs, people can relate to that. And then you're inspiring and motivating other people to know, hey, look, if Darin Kidd can do it, being bankrupt and car repossessed and on Medicaid and applying for food stamps and 25 years ago going to the doctor for being put on antidepressants, which made me feel worse than the depression. If he can turn his life around, I can turn my life around. And it's so true. So for me, inspiration, we have to have clarity. Anytime you feel burned out, you feel unmotivated. I learned this from a billionaire mentor of mine that had 40 companies in 60 countries. But what's even more impressive than that, he paid for 1,000 kids a year to go to college. He had given away 400 million to charity when I was with him. He goes, Darin, you're not burned out, right? You have a lack of clarity. Clarity gives you focus, and focus gives you energy. So anytime I lack inspiration, I lack motivation, I feel burned out, I know that I'm lacking clarity.
Mm. I'm glad you shared that. So the second book that I'm writing right now is on clarity, legacy, and leadership. And so it's interesting when you choose a topic to go deep on how life that's for you. Like I believe these obstacles happen for us. Certainly throws a lot of interesting things in your face. So it's really fascinating that you just shared that for you, when you're feeling burnt out or down, it's a lack of clarity, which means you're not focused. And when you don't have focus, you don't have energy. It's just really, really kind of interesting nugget of wisdom as a side note for for folks who are listening, because that's really powerful and profound. And I agree. That's why when I work with my clients, one of the first things we do is dial in their life and business compass. And that's so that they have focus, because I'm so tired of people saying in response to how are you, I'm busy. Okay, well, are you busy with the right things? And if your life is really out of balance and you're saying yes to the things that aren't getting you closer to what you actually want to achieve, then you're forced to say no to things that will. And that's what leads to burnout and overwhelm and exhaustion and depletion. So, just kind of as a side note, I found that really fascinating. I'm like, oh, okay, tidbit of wisdom for the book. Might be quoting you later on that. Um, so thanks for sharing that. I agree too that the authenticity piece of what you shared is so critical. When I pivoted from corporate America to my own business, I really had to undo a lot of the things that I learned that worked in corporate that do not work in marketing your own business. And part of that, what I discovered was I had this one person who came on a discovery call with me, and she said, Holly, I was really intimidated by your website and your social media presence until I saw a video of you on your website. And then I saw how real and authentic and down to earth and relatable you are. And that's why I booked the call. Now, what that told me was that I need to not be so polished all the time. And I need to get comfortable with sharing the skeletons in my closet, so to speak, and the failures and the lessons and the mistakes and the struggles, because we aren't relatable to those we want to work with if we're so far ahead of them. And so, in the marketing space, one of the mistakes I see time and time again, and where people are leaving money on the table, is they're maybe just a few steps ahead of their client, but they don't speak about where they were those few steps ago. And when you're not speaking directly to the person you're trying to attract, there's a huge gap and they're intimidated to work with you. So, thank you for your bravery, your courage, and your authenticity in sharing that. That's
Well,
powerful.
well, thank you. And you just dropped so much wisdom in what you just said. And I want to make sure people get that. Peter Drucker said it's not how much you do, it's the effectiveness of what you do. It's not being busy, it's about being productive. And so many times, like you said, we're just on a treadmill going nowhere fast. And we're not intentional. We're reactive, we're not proactive. And I believe you can have it all if you do the right things. You schedule, you're intentional, you set goals. And so that's so true. And the other thing that you just said was your website and people going, man, when you shared some of your struggles and you're relatable. That's why it is smart for people to call someone like you, right? When I'm working with clients and companies and I'm speaking, why would I spend my entire life trying to figure out what to do right when I can hire someone that has the expertise that's been where I want to go, shave years off of my learning curve, compress time frames. Entrepreneurs pay for speed. I remember I hired one of the top 20 YouTubers in Forbes the first time. I've hired him multiple times. And I had all these people going, why would you do that? That's crazy. Why would you spend that type of money? Why would you fly to Vegas? And I'm like, why would I not? I don't want to spend a decade trying to figure out at that time what he had figured out. And I went out and, used my YouTube videos and made multiple six figures, if not seven figures, because I was willing to do what most people weren't willing to do, which was pay for speed, compress time frames, pay for someone else's experiences so I could hopefully catapult over some of the mistakes that definitely what I would have made. So I get excited about sharing my mistakes. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of them. I'm like, man, you have no idea how many mistakes I've made. And even when I jumped into I've had franchises, I did affiliate marketing, e-commerce, build an online brand, direct sales, network marketing. I did all those things, for the last 3+ decades. But when I sold the franchises out of direct sales and started going coaching, training, speaking, I've invested more in the last 3 to 4 years in that than I did one of my franchises, which is a lot, right? And I've made so many mistakes. That's why I love talking to you, right? You've got so much knowledge and wisdom. And so to me, it's just smart when people do call someone like you and say, hey, look, Holly, I'm willing to invest. And that's another point. People that look at paying someone like you or like me as a cost, they're not looking at it the right way,
Yeah.
right? People go, what's the best investment? Is it crypto? Is it real estate? No, you are your best investment because you take you with you everywhere you go. And one of the best things that a mentor ever told me was many years ago, Darin, you don't make what you want, you make what you are. And if you want to make more, you have to become more. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And so that's when I go, you know what? I'm going to invest in me. So that way, no matter what happens with the economy, just because they have a recession does not mean I have to participate. And that way people will do anything in the world to pay to work with me. And so anyway, you just dropped so many little golden nuggets that I want to make sure that people caught those.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's funny because you're kind of segueing into our next section on peak performance. So, with what you shared a lot about how investing in yourself is really important. You shared a lot about working with mentors. You shared a lot about the mindset work, the stepping into like who you are so that you can actually be that business owner and get your revenue to that next level. So I'm curious, you've kind of defined to some degree, but how would you define peak performance and how did you arrive at that definition for yourself?
How would I describe peak performance, or maybe what do I do to try to have peak performance?
Let's go with the second part. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, at first you create your habits and your rituals, then they create you. And I don't know about any of you that are listening or watching, but very rarely do I ever feel like doing what I need to do. Right? We were just talking about that, Holly. Like maybe we're under the weather. Or you have we have some aches and pains, or whatever it may be happening to us at the time. So knowing that the only type of motivation that lasts is internal motivation. You're like, I want you to motivate me every day, dear. No, that's not going to work. The only type that lasts is internal. So it's about creating the habits and rituals on a daily basis to where we're creating those, and then eventually they create us, where it doesn't leave anything to chance. So you've got to be intentional. So I'll give you some examples of some things that I do. And Holly, for those that are maybe hearing me for the first time, I like to take complicated things and make them really simple. That's just the way that I learn. And I know in marketing, that's smart too, right? But you want to market at what, fifth to seventh grade level when you're writing your marketing material and all that stuff. But to me, I'm just not a complicated person. I believe, simplify it, but yet I want it to work. So for me, I do things like I always plan tomorrow before tomorrow begins. That's the goal. Like, what are the 3 to 5 things that I'm going to do tomorrow, and only 3 to 5 things. Everything else goes on a future to do list, because what that does, it forces me to prioritize and go, hey, if I only have 3 to 5 things that I can do tomorrow, or I do not go to sleep, so I don't put them down unless I'm going to get them done. What are those 3 to 5 things? The quality of our life, the quality of our business is determined by the quality of questions that we ask ourselves, right? Like AI, Chat GPT. Bad questions get bad answers. It's about the prompts. And when I write that down and then I take and pencil in when I'm going to get those things done tomorrow, then what's happened is I'm being intentional. I'm being proactive and not reactive. And when I do that, then tonight when I go to bed, then it empties my mind and your subconscious goes to work. So not only that, but I do something else. In the morning when I get up, I used to watch Bad Morning America. I do not do that anymore, right? Because it's not Good Morning America, right? If it bleeds, it leads. It's the negativity. And I remember seeing studies here a few months ago where in the first 3 minutes of your day, if you're putting negativity into your brain, there's a 27% increase in the chance that by the end of the day, you will say you had a terrible day. And just in the first few minutes, most people, they grab their phone, they're just engaging in all this negativity. They're that dopamine dump, all of those things. So for me, what I do, I have purpose development and personal development. And not everybody believes what I believe, and that's okay. You have to do what's best for you. But for me, I drink 20 ounces of water because that hydration. Then what I'll do is I'll listen to something on the spiritual side, maybe a sermon, a message for the first 30, 45 minutes while I'm getting ready. Then I have a devotion app that I will listen to on the way to my office. I'll do some breathing techniques. And then when I get to my office, I'm doing personal development. So the first hour, hour and a half of my day, I am just forcing the positivity. I'm blocking the negative. Before my feet get out of the bed, I have an attitude of gratitude, because fear and anxiety can't exist in the same space when you're having gratitude. And then I have things throughout the day. I use the Pomodoro method. I work 25 minutes on, I take a 5-minute break, and I have an app that will ding. Okay, so when that 25-minute timer starts, it's like a race. I'm laser focused, because people that know me, I joke and say I have, ADD, ADHD, ADT, I got them all. But what it does, it causes me to laser focus, and it's like a race to see how much I can get done. Then during the 5 minutes, I move my body. I drink water and I track it. Performance measured is performance improved. So I'm making sure I'm drinking my water. I'm doing push-ups, air squats, stretching. Maybe I go for, every 4 pomodoros, I'll go maybe for a walk and just meditate, do some breathing and some gratitude. I have a stand-up desk, because when you sit, you cut off half your energy. So I'm standing most of the day like I am right now. So I have the things that kick off my day. I have things, those are just a few things that I do throughout the day. And I have a whole success environment set up around me because your external world is a mirror of your internal world. And then at night, before I go to bed, most of them I've worked out. And by the way, when I'm doing these movement breaks, at first, Holly, I'm like, well, it's not that big a deal. I'm doing 20 push ups and 10 air squats and stretching and doing this. Well, a lot of times by the time I go to the gym, I've done 200 push ups. I've done 100 air squats, and nothing changes until you change your energy. But then at night, after when I'm getting my second shower, after working out and stuff like that, before I go to bed, I do a shorter version of some personal development and things like that. So I go to bed and we marinate for the next 6 to 8 hours on what we read and what we listen to right before we go to bed. So throughout the day, those are some things that I have created that help me laser focus, that help me have peak performance. Not only, it helps me have a peak mental state as well. And then there are times where I feel burned out or unmotivated. I will sit down and I'll go, okay, why am I doing this? What's important to me? I've got a 65-inch TV playing YouTube videos of dream homes and travel places and all that stuff throughout the day, affirmations, pictures of my family. I've got a whole success environment and music playlist of music that's upbeat, motivating for me. So I didn't mean to like hit you with the fire hose of information, but I get excited because all of those things I've 10x my productivity. And I just keep finding little things. How can I hack this and hack that? And how can I be a little bit better? And what can I do to improve and leverage my time, energy, and efforts? All of these things make a difference, a big difference over time. When you're doing them in one day, here's the catch, Holly, they don't seem to make that big of a difference. But compounded over a period of time, it's like the penny a day and doubling it for 30 days. It makes a massive difference.
Yeah. So that was a lot for our listeners. For those of you who heard that and you're feeling like a deer in headlights or maybe a little overwhelmed because you're like, I have not done any of those things. Maybe you've done two of those things, and you're like, oh my gosh. Uh, let me dial this back for you so we can take some bite-sized chunks out of this. So a lot of what Darin has shared is something that I help clients with and that I've also implemented in different ways. And it's very unique to each individual. So you need to feel one, permission to experiment with what works for you to reach peak performance and define that in your own unique way. So don't let what Darin shares or even what I share influence exactly what you think you should or could be doing. So what I like to share is there's a couple of resources that I've used that have been extremely helpful for focus. One of those is the perfect day formula. It helps you, similar to what Darin was sharing, prioritize your time, really get curious about what times of day you're most efficient for different types of work, and really just discover you and learn what works for you. That helps you also focus and dial things in. Again, also, like he was sharing, having like a nighttime ritual where you're putting yourself in an optimal place. There's a lot of science behind what happens overnight, and a lot of times when we have problems we can't solve while we're consciously awake, we can solve them sleeping on it. That's why a lot of people say I want to sleep on it, because there's actual power to that. So that's also extremely powerful. Another thing that he shared that was really fascinating is about and for those watching video, my water bottle says, where your focus goes, energy flows. So what we focus on really does matter. So if there's things that are depressing you, you don't want to start your day that way. You want to have different ways that you can actually stay positive, even when you feel chemically off, physically off, whatever gets in your way, so that you can come back to the good things. And then last but not least, I heard recently from somebody I was chatting with that if you have a lot of fear and anxiety, you have equal or greater capacity for that much hope. And it's just simply misplaced. So if you're kind of in a space right now where you're feeling overwhelmed or fearful or like you could never get there, or you have a lot of anxiety, it actually simply means that your future focus is in the wrong direction and that you can choose today to choose hope instead of focusing on that anxiety. And some of the examples that Darin was sharing are things that you can begin to experiment with so that you can achieve your own peak performance. Now, Darin, because that was a lofty and powerful answer, we're going to skip to another question. And I want to ask you, how have you used what you've learned with your peak performance to optimize your customer experience?
Yes. And real quick, I'm glad you said what you just said before that question. Um, what I just shared with you took me a while to get to that by experimenting. I'd use the perfect day, that, perfect day formula, something similar to that. I don't know exactly what you do, but creating the perfect day. And I started out going, hey, well, Pomodoro method, let me just try that. But then I have 5 minutes. What am I going to do in my 5 minutes? Well, I need to make sure I'm drinking water. Then I added in some movements. Then I added in some stretching. Some people like to go to the gym first thing in the morning. I like to go in the afternoon to get a break. So yeah, focus on control the controllables. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. Focus on where you're going, not where you've been, and where your focus goes, energy flows. So that was really good. But yeah, you're right. I hit you with the fire hose of information. Now, as far as the customer experience, peak performance, I don't. Let's see. I guess it would. My goal is always to under promise and over deliver, and focus on the customer and not me. So many times it's easy to focus on what we want and not what somebody else wants. And everyone is tuned into their favorite radio station with them, WIIFM, what's in it for me? And so if you're laser focused on how can I make the customer journey and experience better for the people that I'm serving, it makes a huge difference. And Holly, I was just interviewed on a few radio stations on Monday, like actually five, and one of the examples that I used was Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster was crushing it. Netflix, one of the co-founders of Netflix actually tweeted they laughed us out of the office when we offered to sell Netflix for 50 million. But Blockbuster said, why would we get rid of late fees when that's a huge source of our income? But Netflix is like, no, I want to make sure that we're giving the best customer experience. What if we had a subscription? They could keep the movies as long as they wanted to. They could rent unlimited movies. Well, they didn't. That was not their focus. Their focus was on Blockbuster, not the customer, not the consumer, not them. And years later, Blockbuster is a billion in debt, bankrupt. But yet Netflix, last time I checked, their market cap was 190 billion. With the economy and the where things are going, now is the time to be innovative, think outside the box, go the extra mile like never before, because the biggest transfer of wealth happens during recessions, depressions, and during wars. And so right now is a great time. When things are awesome, it's hard to gain market share. But for me, this is separation season. It's preparation and separation season by laser focusing on not only attracting new customers, but retaining the ones that you get.
Yeah, 100%. It's really I'm glad you said that because a lot of people look at recession times and their fear factor just exponentially grows and they start to freak out. And it's really interesting because I had my best quarter in business last quarter. I'm kind of like, recession? What are you talking about?
Congrats.
Like, things are great. And this quarter is even going to be bigger than last quarter. So, first of all, if you're freaking out, you're a business owner and you're thinking a recession means that you're not going to make money. That's insane. Kind of throw that thought out the window because it's not real. There's so many opportunities, and really, recession just means fine tuning your customer experience and going the extra mile, making sure that you're really treating your existing customers extremely well. You're staying in tune with what they need and taking that into account as you build out additional services or products that support them, because then you're really in tune with their problems and their challenges. And the more you do that, the more they're going to remain raving customers and fans for life. And then also, I like to look at the customer experience as your ATM. So, if you're really good, if you delivered a really good customer experience, you have a great employee experience so that they're delivering a great customer experience, your customers are your ATM because you can get amazing referrals, you can get amazing reviews, you have that base of income because they continue working with you because they believe in the relationship and the services that you provide or the products that you provide. And it's all about relationship and experience and showing up for them. So, yes, if you are freaking out about the recession, you're worried, my challenge to you would be what can you do that's going to be phenomenal, unexpected, and delightful for your customers today? Because if you do that, you will not fail. In fact, you're going to have an even bigger quarter, exponentially larger than you can even envision today. So,
Mm.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. But Speaking about money, since you've got this history of earning a lot of money, we're going to talk about revenue, which is what listeners love to hear about. So, can you share an example of when you've left money on the table in the past and what you did to fix
Oh my goodness. You hit me out of the blue with this one.
it?
Hey, I do. Can I go back to what you were just
Yeah,
talking
of course.
about? Okay. So I do want to say this with, because I think this is encouraging. If you look at the companies that came out of a recession, we have, Microsoft and Uber and Airbnb and, I think, was it Slack, WhatsApp? There's a ton of companies that came out of down times in the economy. And I was listening to an interview the other day where there was a guy that's like, look, in 2008, I was fired from my job in sales and I would sell to hospitals. But he read an article. And what did the article do? The article said, hey, look, the recessions, downturns in the economy, it's a great time to start a business because we get paid based on the size of the problem that we solve. And so it changed his perspective, his mindset. Tony Robbins talks about it's not a lack of resources, it's resourcefulness. So here this guy goes, what are some problems that I think I could solve? He had no experience in undergarments, like t-shirts and underwear, but he started working on something. Well, that launched Tommy John, which is now a global monster brand. So the biggest transfer of wealth happens during recessions, depressions, and during wars if we ask the right questions, if we do the right things, if we separate ourselves from the competitors. And not only that, I believe now also highly for all the people that have employees, now is the time to make sure that you're taking really good care of your employees because that's changing. It's hard to get a good employee and it's also hard to retain them. And so doing the right things with your employees as well. So yeah, it's exciting times right now to gain market share, get ahead, ask the right questions to capitalize on that. There's been so many times I've left money on the table, highly. I will give you an example of something we did right. It's a fun example. One of our franchises that we opened in a town with about 20,000 people. And you can use your existing community by doing the right things with your customers, creating that experience that blows their mind. And we did that. We did no advertising. It was 1,100 square feet. It was a yogurt franchise. We opened the door in a small town, just opened the door, and day one had over 1,000 people a day coming through the door, which was crazy, right? For a small town to do about $100,000 in yogurt the first 30 days with about a 30% profit was nuts. um, but where I've made mistakes in the past, I would say it was probably building my brand and having massive growth on social media, growing to hundreds of thousands of followers, but yet not creating the right lead magnets, not build focus on building my list. Attention, money goes where attention flows. Attention is the new currency. And so not doing the right things building my brand. I did some things right, but there were a lot of things that I didn't do right. And one was just focusing on my list and monetizing that list and seeing how can I add more value to the people that were following me at that time. And so there's been a bunch of examples. We don't have that much time on this podcast to talk about all my mistakes, but I would say being very intentional about using your existing community to build your community, doing the right things with that community, and then making sure you keep your name because repetition equals recall. When you're building your brand, you want to keep your name in front of them by continuing to add value to the point where they're like, wow, if I get this much value from following them on social media and their emails, can I can't imagine what I would get by actually working directly with Holly. So those are some things I would have done a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Learn from that.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of what I do as a revenue and performance consultant that cuts across all 5 areas that people leave money on the table and lack peak performance is in the marketing space, right? This is where people really make some pretty big mistakes is they don't realize that their email list is their liquid gold. Like that is where you're leaving so much money on the table. And it's a list that you want to make sure you're nurturing, you're building a relationship, you're building fans, you're sharing incredible value, but you're also listening when that list responds to some of the things that you're sharing. And so, what I noticed too is a big mistake that people make that you didn't necessarily share is they will just be asking for things all the time. Like they're just constantly selling and asking for their list. And that's not nurturing your list. You want to be adding value. You want to be very clear on the problems and challenges your list is facing, your avatar. And like if you have subsections and tagged sections of your list, then obviously personalizing those messages to different aspects of your list. But the important thing is that they get to know you. You know, what's powerful in marketing and brand building is stories. And you've heard Darin share stories throughout. You've heard me share stories throughout. And that's because stories stick, they resonate. People can see themselves in that story. So, as you're developing your lead magnets, you're nurturing your list, start experimenting with stories. And if you, one great way to do that is like what Darren's doing right now is guesting. When you share a story, see when people lean in or see their response and see like what resonates, because that's going to help you dial in your brand messaging, your brand stories, your marketing, and then really get a better response. So you can kind of split test what is landing. So thanks for sharing that, because I know a lot of people, that's a huge gap that a lot of people do not understand. I can't tell you how many times even business owners who've been in business for 10 to 20 years and I go in and do a marketing assessment and they haven't done any nurturing campaigns with their lists for 10 to 20 years. And
Mm.
they might even have a list of 20 to 50,000 or more. And it's not tagged. We have no idea how they came onto the list. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is insanity. It's crazy to me. But it's also amazing because then there's so much opportunity that we can start testing with that list. Okay, I do want to pivot and I want to ask you, and I'm sure you're going to respond to some of the things I just shared as well. That's totally cool. But what is the next shiny object that you're hoping to build a new revenue stream from?
You know, it's fascinating that you asked that question because I was sitting down doing that this morning. I was going, okay, where do I want to go? How can I create that blue ocean with the blue ocean strategy? And how can I differentiate myself than every other person out there? And so, to be honest with you, that is what I'm currently working on. Is what am I passionate about? What do people say that I'm really good about? Where can I add the most value? Where can I impact the most people? Because I think back, 25 years ago, I had no hope. I mean, I felt hopeless, and that's I remember seeing things like you can live this long without water, this long without oxygen, but you can't live at all without hope, and it's so true. Um, and so for me, I want to make sure that I'm doing as much good as I can to as many people as I can, as long as I can. And I don't want to look at people as how they are, but how they can be with their God given potential. And that's my passion. And so that next shiny object, I'm not sure. I've got some opportunities that are coming my way, and it's fascinating. Some are franchise opportunities, a lot of speaking opportunities, um, and so right now that is where I'm in the trenches, going, okay, what? Because I also know that you can't ride two horses at once. So I'm very careful not to, because me, I get excited. And if I'm not careful, I can go in too many different directions and don't do anything like I should. And I just know that's me. But when I put my mind on something and I'm laser focused and I have the I will until mindset and attitude, I feel unstoppable. And it's not that I'm and I think, Holly, one of the biggest blessings that's ever happened that I have going for me, nothing's ever come easy. Nothing. Like people like, oh, Darren, it's just so natural for you. No, it's not. You have no idea. Like if I read 10 pages, my mind is wandering on 9 of those pages. I have to go back and reread it. They're like, how do you remember so many quotes? And how do you remember this? It's because of that repetition. It's not that I retain it better than everyone else. I'll just listen more times than most people. And it's not that I don't get knocked down and I don't have failures. It's just that I refuse to stay down. I continue to get back up one more time, like Rocky, one more round. I didn't hear the bell. And so for me, working on that as we speak.
Got it, got it. Yeah. I'm kind of curious, like, just a thought that came to me would be something around an I will until community or an I will until course. Because you talked about, you kept bringing up hope and how when you don't have that, you can't live. And that's something that could work with both of the opportunities you're exploring as an additional avenue. So just a thought that kind of intuitively came to mind.
Yeah, I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Amazing. Well, this has been a wonderful interview. Another thing before we get into our rapid fire questions as we close out is he mentioned as he's exploring that next revenue stream that he's going after, he's trying to figure out what his superpower in business is. He didn't say it that way, but that's what I like to ask people on my calls is what is your superpower in business? And if you don't know what your superpower is and you're trying to figure out that next thing you're going to monetize, my challenge to you is to go to loved ones, mentors, coaches, family around you and ask them what they think your superpower is. What is it that Darin does that nobody else can do? What is the magic that he brings that nobody else has that's specifically unique to him? And if you do this, you're going to actually come up with some clarity and some really interesting ideas. And you might be surprised at what your superpower actually is. So that's my challenge to our listeners today is to get curious about that. And also, Darin, it might help you as you explore your next revenue stream that you're going to monetize.
Yeah.
With that, we're going to wrap it up. We've got 2 rapid fire questions, and then I'll explain to everybody how they can get in touch with Darin. All right. What is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
Be very intentional about who you associate with. We hear that all the time. Your associations work harder on you than you work on them. You become the average of the people that you associate with the most. So the question you have to ask yourself is what are my associations doing to me, or what are they doing for me? And if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Like now I'm in rooms where their companies have done over 30 billion. They're doing 100 million a month. Been speaking on stages recently with John Assaraf from The Secret and Les Brown and some of the best in the world. And at first it was extremely intimidating, but now I feel like I belong in that room, because I'm delivering great value and things like that. But what it did, it raised my internal lid, that invisible lid in your own head. The late billionaire Paul J. Meyer told me you will never get past your self-imposed limitations. It's not what goes on around you as is important what goes on within you. So your associations are everything. Be very intentional.
Yeah, it's interesting you're sharing that because I've actually let go of a lot of relationships in my life for exactly that reason. So, yes, break that glass ceiling, break that box, get rid of it. It doesn't exist, but it is subconsciously there. So, make sure you do that. All right, my last question for you today, Darin. What is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
The legacy. Well, unfortunately, I've lost quite a few family members, several in the last few years, including my mom and my 24-year-old nephew and his 11-month-old baby in a house fire. It was tragic. And it just reminded me that we're taking nothing with us. I don't care how much money you have, it's not going with you. And my philosophy and my attitude is I'm going to treat every day as if it's the last day of my life. And one day we're going to be right. So the legacy I want to leave is I want my kids to know that, and for me, it's all about faith, family, then finance. So I want them to know that my dad, he never quit. He wanted to help as many people as he could, as long as he could, do as much good as he could. And I look at my mom, her life example. There's an old saying that your actions speak so loudly. Sometimes people can hear what you're saying. So I want people to go, man, Darin, he didn't just talk it, he walked the walk.
Yeah, that's good. Good words of wisdom for our listeners today. Thank you so much for sharing that. This has been a great interview. So for those of you who want to get in touch with Darin, to want to get involved in his community, hire him as a speaker, etc., in the show notes, I have all of his social media information as well as his website. You can find him on iwilluntil.com. That's his website. And I will have all of his links for Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Pinterest in the show notes, as well as the YouTube link. Thank you again, Darin. I really appreciate you taking the time to share with my listeners.
Thank you, Holly. It's been an honor and a pleasure. You are the best. And so I appreciate you big time.
Thank you. And to our listeners, I'll see you on the next episode of Inspiration Contagion. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.